Welcome to this week's Real Estate Weekly lesson. I'm your host, Greg Hellback, and thank you for watching this video or listening to this podcast. If you're not familiar with me, I've been a full-time real estate investor for 10 years. I've done 400 plus transactions, and everything you're going to learn is real-world practical knowledge from the trenches. This is not regurgitated theory out of a book. So if you get value from this, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, if you can share this with someone who you think would get value from it and post it on social media, that would mean a lot to me. And today I'm going to talk about the top 3 KPIs in your off-market real estate business that you need to pay attention to so you can continue to grow your business or scale your business if you are desiring to do that. The top 3 KPIs are as follows, and I'm going to break all of them down here after I define them. Number 1, your cost per deal. Number 2, your profit per deal. And number 3, your return on ad spend. So these are the 3 numbers I'm going to break down. I'm going to explain what they are, how they work. And just to context this video a little bit, this is if you're paying for leads, right? If you're getting referrals, if you're buying off of wholesalers, these will most likely not apply. So I'm going to make an assumption here that if you're watching this, you are doing direct-to-seller marketing. So you're spending money on Google or mailers or cold calling or whatever the case might be. So this is applying if you are doing paid advertising. So first, I'm going to define the first KPI, which is your cost per deal, which is basically how much money does it cost you in advertising to acquire a property to flip or wholesale. So the way that you find that out is you figure out how much money you have to spend in advertising in order to get a property closed, right? Whether that's a wholesale deal closed or that's a flip closed. And you got to be careful with this because a lot of people look at their cost per contract, which means how much money does it take to get a contract signed, but they don't account for the contract fallout that happens in this business that's inevitable. You're going to get properties under contract, and some of those contracts aren't going to work out for whatever reasons. Sellers canceling, deals not making sense, title issues. So you have to actually look at your cost per deal. So a little mini KPI out of that would be your cost per lead, right? So a lot of times you're going to spend money on marketing, you're going to get a bunch of leads, and you're going to figure out how much was the average lead based on the marketing spend. So just doing some quick redneck math here. Let's say you spend $10,000 on marketing and you get a grand total of 42 leads. In that case, your cost per lead would be $238. And let's say you need 42 leads to get a deal. Well, then your cost per deal in that case would be $10,000. So you need to figure out how much does it cost to acquire a customer, because when you can do that consistently and predictably, then you can basically reverse engineer how many deals you want to do, assuming that KPI sticks, which means that it doesn't change and ultimately, hopefully, it gets better, right? When you see people's cost per deal creep up, that's when you can get into trouble if you don't have your second KPI down, which I'm going to share right now, which is your profit per deal. So this is a pretty simple one. This is how much money are you making on average per transaction, right? Which is, let's say you're wholesaling. Let's say your average profit per deal is $30,000, right? Let's say you're flipping houses. Your average profit per deal is $50,000. You need to know the average amount of money you make on every transaction you do, because when you can do that, then you can basically say, okay, well, if I know my first KPI, which is my cost per deal, and I know my second KPI, which is my profit per deal, I can pretty much forecast how much gross profit and net profit we're going to do in our business. So let's just say that your average cost per deal is $10,000 and your average profit per deal is $50,000, that's pretty freaking good. That basically means you're spending $1 to make $5, which is actually taking me to my third KPI, which is the return on ad spend, which I'm not going to cover yet because I want to close the loop on the profit per deal. Now, this is really going to depend on a few things. This is going to depend on the area that you're in and the exit strategy that you do. So if you are in the Midwest and you're doing wholesale deals, there's a pretty high chance your profit per deal is going to be a lot lower than me, who does flips in the Northeast and the Northwest, where it's very expensive, right? In Seattle and New York, the profit per deal on flips is a lot higher than the profit per deal on a wholesaler in Kansas City, Missouri, for example. So just because I have a higher profit per deal doesn't mean that your profit per deal sucks. It's all based on your cost per deal. So, for example, back in 2019, you used to be able to spend $2,000 cost per deal to make $25,000 profit per deal, and your return on ad spend, which is the third number, was insane. But as competition's gotten higher and sellers have gotten savvier, the cost per deal has kept climbing, And if you don't keep your profit per deal at the same, if not better, it's tough to be profitable in this business. So you need to understand the other aspect of profit per deal is your exit strategy, right? Most likely, if you're flipping houses and you're doing it the right way, your profit per deal should be more than your wholesale, right? So that's like if you're making double flipping compared to wholesaling, probably makes sense to flip some of your houses because you're ultimately going to make more money on the same cost per deal. Obviously, there's other factors that go into flipping, but if you have a good system down, it shouldn't be an issue. Now, the third KPI, which kind of ties everything together, is the return on your ad spend, ROAS. So what is the money are you getting compared to how much are you putting into the system? So for example, a good ROAS would be at minimum 4-to-1, which means for every dollar you give that marketing channel, you get $4 back in revenue. So if you spend $1,000 on Google, you get at least $4,000 back. If you spend $10,000 on Google, you get $40,000 back. If you spend $100,000 on Google, you get $400,000 back. Now, is that common in Google? If you spend 100 to get 400? Probably not, because what you'll see with ROAS is that the more you spend, the more the ROAS diminishes. Because in theory here, if you could spend $4 million a month and get $16 million in return, who wouldn't do that? But what you see in any marketing channel, advertising just diminishes as you spend more. So the lower your advertising budget, generally speaking, within reason, you got to spend enough to get some data, the higher your ROAS is going to be. But then the higher your advertising budget, the lower your ROAS most likely is going to be. So let me share with you my KPIs. So in New York and Washington, which are two expensive markets, my average cost per deal is like $8,000, right? And my average profit per deal is around $35,000. So let's do that ROAS. You take the revenue and you divide it by the cost. So $35,000 divided by 8 is 4.3, right? Which is pretty good. So that's my market, right? Your market might be different. And the reason my number is 35 and not 50 is because I do some wholesaling and some flipping. But overall, my ROAS is good. I run campaigns sometimes where it's 10. I run some campaigns sometimes where it's 2. It all blends together and it gets me that 4.3 number, which is the sign of a healthy business. So here's the action items for you as you're watching this video or this podcast. You got to go in, you got to look at all the marketing money that you spent, and you got to look at all the deals you closed. You add up all the revenue and you divide it by the deals you've closed to get your cost per deal. So let's say you spend $100,000 on marketing and you closed 6 deals. You would take 100,000 divided by 6, which takes you to a $16,000 cost per deal. I'm just making that number up, obviously. And then your profit per deal, you take the amount of deals you've done, take the profit you've made on all those deals, you add all the profit up, and then you divide it by the amount of deals you've done, and then you get your profit per deal. And then the last thing to figure out your ROAS is you take all the marketing money you spent, and then you take all the revenue you've done, and then you divide it by how much money you've spent. So if you've done $500,000 in revenue, and you spend, $32,000 in marketing, revenue divided by cost is how you get the ROAS. So it would take you to 15, which would be insane if you did that. So if you did that, give me a call. Anyway, those are the top 3 KPIs. If you got value, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening, share the show with someone else. And as always, if you're in Seattle or the Hudson Valley or Delaware and you have a deal you want to do with me, Greg@velocityhousebuyers.com or on Instagram @Grego37, and I'll see you on the next REI Weekly Lesson.